What do you mean he got burned because his gloves had holes in them? Kendrick Boone's voice was steady, but the storm in his eyes betrayed the fire inside. He sat at the head of a long, polished boardroom table, framed by the glass and steel of the headquarters he'd built from the ground up. This wasn't just a company to him. It was his legacy. 15 years ago, he'd started from a rented garage with nothing but grit, a second-hand laptop, and a dream. Now, 17 warehouses stretched across 5 states, each one humming with productivity. But today that dream felt tainted. The productivity aroused him, filled him with joy, while the tainted lingered. He began to think of the Across the table, his logistics director shifted uncomfortably. "It's standard policy, sir," he said, avoiding eye contact. "Employees are responsible for bringing their own PPE. We reimburse them after 90 days if they stay past probation." Kendrick leaned back, his jaw tightening. "So, day 1, they're on their own?" "Yes, sir, that's how it's written." There was a long pause. Kendrick didn't speak, but the silence was heavy. Something inside him twisted. This wasn't how he ran things, not the company he had envisioned. He built it on safety, loyalty, and honest labor. He knew every name once. He shook every hand. But now, policies had replaced people. Excel sheets had replaced stories. And this policy meant a man spent 3 hours in urgent care because no one thought to hand him a decent pair of gloves. It didn't sit right, not one bit. That night, Kendrick made a decision. He'd go to the source, not as the boss, not in a suit, but as a new hire, just another guy with calloused hands and rent to pay. The Detroit warehouse had opened less than a year ago. Most of the staff wouldn't even recognize him. The last press photo of him was outdated. He'd trimmed his hair, grown a beard, dropped 20 pounds. All deliberate. He wanted to blend in, disappear into the background. On Monday, he arrived just after dawn. The warehouse loomed like a concrete colossus, cold and industrial, filled with the growling echo of machines spinning to life. His disguise was simple: cargo pants, steel-toe boots, a faded hoodie. His name for the week? Kyle. Just a fresh face in a sea of strangers. Tara, the district hiring manager, greeted him with a clipboard and a frown. "No gear?" she asked, eyeing his empty hands. "I was told it'd be provided," Kendrick replied calmly. She rolled her eyes and muttered, "Not here. You're on your own. Gloves, vest, goggles, non-negotiable." "Where do I get them?" "Store across the street. Don't be late. You're already behind." He jogged across the icy asphalt to a grimy supply shop and dropped nearly $70 for the bare essentials. It wasn't the money that stung. It was the principle. $70 gone before he'd made a dime. For someone living paycheck to paycheck, that wasn't a small ask. That was groceries. That was gas. That was medicine for a sick kid. By the time he returned, the floor was alive with movement. A wiry guy in his early 20s tossed him a clipboard. "I'm Drew. You're shadowing me. Try not to slow me down." They got to work. Lifting, hauling, loading, heavy crates, awkward equipment, no robotics, no shortcuts. Just grit and repetition. It wasn't just hard, it was relentless. "You do this every day?" Kendrick asked, sweat already soaking through his shirt. 5 days a week, sometimes 6 if someone calls out, Drew replied without looking up. "No sick days till month 3. People come in sick or they quit. Simple math." Kendrick blinked. "Why?" Drew didn't answer. He just smirked and said, "You'll see." By noon, Kendrick's muscles screamed. His back throbbed. He hadn't worked like this in over a decade. But Drew moved like he was made of springs and exhaustion, his face stoic, his breath steady. On break, Kendrick finally noticed the younger man rubbing his palms raw. "Your gloves okay?" Kendrick asked. "Nope." Drew held them up. The fingers were frayed to threads, the padding nearly gone. Will not get new ones. Can't afford it till next check. Nobody helps with that, he said with a bitter laugh. Management says safety's a shared value, whatever that means. Kendrick's gaze swept across the break room. A woman sat nearby, taping up her vest with duct tape. Her gloves were floral cotton gardening gloves with holes at the knuckles. Another guy's safety goggles were cracked and taped at the bridge. It wasn't just Drew. It was everyone. Then came Vince, the warehouse manager, swaggering, loud, clipboard in hand like it was a sheriff's badge. "Let's go, people. I see standing, I start writing write-ups." Drew muttered under his breath. He's worse when the district guy's not around. Kendrick watched Vince berate a woman named Pilar, who was clearly struggling. She had a brace on her ankle, and she moved with a limp. "You want a desk job?" Vince shouted. "Then go home. Don't make me carry you." "I'm fine," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the warehouse noise. "No, you're not," he snapped. Kendrick's fists curled at his sides. Not yet. Not now. But something inside him was waking up. Something that wasn't going back to sleep. Kendrick snapped, sharp, fast, unexpected, even to himself. The words leapt from his throat before his brain caught up. Vince turned like a predator scenting weakness. "You got something to say, new guy?" Kendrick studied his breath, heart pounding. "She's working. You don't have to talk to her like that." A tense hush followed. Vince took a step closer, puffing up like a man who'd never been challenged. "You want to join her on the unemployment line?" Drew's hand landed on Kendrick's arm, tense and urgent. "Let it go, man. Not worth it." Kendrick bit the inside of his cheek hard enough to taste blood. His fists itched, but he needed to see more to understand this place from the inside. Blowing his cover now would help no one. Not yet. By shift's end, Kendrick's body throbbed. His hands were blistered. Every muscle howled. But the worst pain came from within, a hollow, churning guilt. He had built this, brick by brick, policy by policy. Somewhere along the journey from garage dream to industrial empire, he had lost sight of the most crucial part, the people, the ones whose sweat kept the gears turning. At the exit, Pilar sat alone on a bench, her ankle brace off, foot swollen and purpled. Kendrick eased down beside her. "You okay?" She glanced up, tired but composed. "I live. Can't afford to miss a day." "You shouldn't have to pay just to show up to work," he said, voice low. She let out a small, bitter laugh. "Tell that to the guy who owns this place." Kendrick didn't flinch. He stared ahead, expression unreadable. Maybe he just doesn't know. She met his gaze, tired eyes piercing. Then he should. He nodded, slow and solemn. He would. By the next morning, Kendrick was back in his gear. Same faded hoodie, same beat-up gloves. His body ached in places he'd long forgotten, but his resolve was sharper than ever. He moved past the loading dock, where the rhythmic beeping of a reversing forklift pierced the dawn silence. Inside, the warehouse buzzed again, but it wasn't energy. It was tension. It was survival. And no one smiled. Not even out of politeness. Drew waved him over. "Hope you ate. Truck unload day." No clipboard, no time for chit-chat. Just a nod toward the back where a massive trailer loomed. Kendrick trailed him, noticing everything. A sick man with a limp hacking into his sleeve. A young woman lacing her boots with raw, bandaged knuckles. This wasn't just wear and tear. It was systemic. "How many people usually unload?" Kendrick whispered. "6, Drew said. "We're down to 4. Malik didn't show. Probably couldn't afford gas." Kendrick looked at the trailer. "We're unloading all that?" "Yep. 40 pallets minimum. sorted by noon or Vince throws a tantrum. The overhead bell rang. The back door groaned open. Cold air slapped his face like ice water. The first pallet was brutal. 100-pound air compressors. Kendrick's back strained as he heaved the pallet jack into motion. Drew was already ahead, gliding down the line like a veteran soldier in a war nobody cared about. "Stay close," Drew called over his shoulder. "We don't get to baby anyone." The next few hours blurred into a cycle of strain, sweat, and shouted commands. Vince's voice crackled over the radio non-stop. Always urgent, never helpful. Then chaos. A pallet toppled. Kendrick dropped his jack and sprinted. Miguel, a young worker, stood frozen, his face pale with shock. "I didn't see it coming," he stammered. "It just slipped." "You okay?" Kendrick asked. "My foot." Miguel tugged off his boot. His toe was swollen, already turning a deep purple. "We need to get him checked out." Drew shook his head grimly. "He won't go. If he clocks out, he loses 4 hours' pay. That's a quarter of his check." Kendrick's stomach twisted. "You're saying he's going to finish the shift on a busted foot?" "Seen worse," Drew said, voice hollow. Kendrick helped Miguel to a chair near the break area and flagged down Carla, the floor lead. She approached with all the warmth of a malfunctioning machine. "What now?" she barked. "He dropped a pallet. Might have broken a toe." She folded her arms. "He can leave, but no sick time without a doctor's note. And if he's faking..." "You think he's pretending?" Kendrick asked, incredulous. "Not my call. It's policy." Miguel said nothing, just lowered his eyes and stayed seated. By the time the final pallet was logged, Kendrick's clothes clung to him, soaked through. His mouth tasted metallic from dehydration. He staggered into the break room and grabbed a water bottle, but froze mid-sip at the sound of voices through the thin divider wall behind the manager's office. "Tell him the new guy's too slow," Vince sneered. "I don't care if he's dying, he's dragging down the numbers." "Ernst," he asked, "about safety gear again." Carla's voice followed. "Then give him the usual line. Budget cuts, supply delays, whatever. If he keeps pushing, tell him he can go back to wherever he came from." Della ranked the equator on deck. Truer stood motionless, bottle crumpled in his hand. Something broke inside. He found Drew on the floor, sorting copper coils. "How long's Vince been in charge?" "Since day one. Transferred from Cleveland." "What kind of reputation?" Drew hesitated. "He doesn't fire people. He breaks them until they quit." Kendrick's frown deepened. "And Carla?" "She does what he says, wants his job." And across the floor, a middle-aged woman named Jill strained to lift a bin onto the conveyor. Kendrick rushed to help. "Thanks," she panted. "Heavier than it looks." "Well, isn't this on the lift?" "Been broken 6 weeks. I've put in 3 tickets. Nothing." She wiped her forehead, eyes red from exhaustion. "I used to like it here. We had real team leads. Now it's just pressure. You complain, you're labeled difficult." Before Kendrick could respond, Vince's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Break's over. Let's go, people." Jill muttered and bent back to her task. That night, Kendrick didn't go home. He checked into a motel and called his assistant from a burner phone. "I need a full audit on the Detroit site. HR, maintenance, payroll. Quietly. Anything else? Find out who hired Vince." The next morning, Kendrick returned early, plan in hand. He spotted Miguel limping, but back at work. "You didn't take the day off?" Miguel shook his head, embarrassed. "I need the hours." Kendrick handed him a small envelope. "Open it later, trust me." Mid-morning, Vince exploded again. "South Line now. 1 more delay and I'm cutting shifts." He jabbed a finger at Jill. "You. Why are those bins still sitting?" "And waiting on the lift." Then haul them manually. I've already done 5. Then do 6? That's enough, Kendrick said firmly. Vince wheeled around. You again? You're pushing people past their limits. I'm keeping this place running by breaking it. Vince stepped forward, eyes hard. You want to be next, hero? Carla appeared behind him, nervous. Vince, maybe we... You don't speak unless I tell you to. Kendrick exhaled slowly. Then he reached up and pulled off his hoodie. Underneath was a crisp executive polo, embroidered with the company logo. Silence. Drew dropped a bin. Carla went pale. Vince blinked. What the hell is this? I'm Kendrick Boone, he said clearly. I own this company, and you're done here. Vince laughed, but the sound fell flat. No one joined him. I've got policies to follow. Good. You'll have plenty of time to review them elsewhere. He turned to Carla. You're being transferred, effective immediately, under review. Carla said nothing. Kendrick faced the workers. Everyone, take 15. Paid. No one moved at first. Then slowly they did. Some leaned against crates. Some walked outside into the fresh air like it was the first breath of spring. Kendrick walked to jail. That lift will be fixed by tomorrow, and you're getting a permanent helper. She just nodded, lips tight. He turned to Drew. You've got ideas, I can tell. Starting Monday, you're helping redesign the workflow. Drew blinked. You serious? Dead serious? Miguel approached, envelope clutched in his hand like something fragile. He looked down at it, voice quiet. I didn't open it. Kendrick gave a gentle nod. It's a voucher. Full medical coverage for your injury, and 2 weeks paid time off. Miguel's eyes shimmered with tears he didn't want to show. He turned away quickly, shoulders tense, but nodded once, grateful, stunned, and still trying to process what compassion felt like in a place that rarely offered it. The warehouse was quieter now, not silent, but less brittle. The air still held tension, but it had changed shape. It wasn't fear anymore. It was the quiet hum of possibility, of change. Kendrick stood in the center of it all, surrounded by steel beams, dust, and tired faces that looked at him differently now, with curiosity, yes, but also something rarer. Hope. By Thursday morning, Kendrick had already started assembling a temporary oversight team from headquarters. They'd be arriving the following week, but for now he remained Kyle, a worker with busted gloves and a quiet mission. He needed to go deeper, to see firsthand the cracks in the foundation. He clocked in at 5:45 a.m. and headed straight for the west loading bay. There, Pilar was already stacking boxes onto a rolling cart, every movement deliberate and slow. Her brace was gone, but her limp had worsened. You ever get that looked at? Kendrick asked quietly. She didn't glance up. No point, they'll just tell me to stay off it and then dock my pay. Eric Kendrick nodded, kneeling beside her to help lift a heavy bin. His hand paused at the edge, dented inward and jagged. She noticed. That one sliced a guy's forearm open last week. Carla said it was avoidable. She shifted her grip without missing a beat, muscles trembling from overuse but fueled by survival. As they pushed the cart toward the inventory shelves, a loud voice shattered the morning routine. What the hell is this mess? Kendrick turned. A tall man in a company jacket, someone new, was pacing through the return intake area, eyes sweeping the disorganized stacks of half-wrapped pallets. This is unacceptable, the man barked. Where's the floor lead? I said. Where is the person in charge of this zone? No one answered. A few workers exchanged glances, but no one stepped forward. Silence had become a survival mechanism. Kendrick walked over slowly. You new here? The man straightened. District logistics. I'm here to evaluate throughput. This is a disaster. Kendrick glanced around. They've been short-staffed all week. 4 off rotation, 1 injured. Vince kept shifting people instead of backfilling. They should have said something. The man replied curtly. They did. The man eyed him. You're just a worker. And whoever told you that should have listened through the right channels. This isn't just a suggestion box. The man scowled. Name's Peter Nallen. My parents are dead. They're in heaven. I had just such a good life. Kendrick gave a polite nod. Thanks, Peter. Peter didn't catch the shift in tone. He turned and barked at a younger worker. Stop double-stacking those. You trying to collapse the whole row? By mid-morning, Kendrick had been reassigned to the picking line. The scanner gun he received was glitchy. Its screen flickered, buttons sticky from wear. Can I get a replacement? He asked the equipment coordinator, a man in his 50s who looked like he'd aged twice as fast from decades in the warehouse. Only got 3 working ones left. Yours is on the repair list. Has been for 2 months. Kendrick sighed and kept moving. The picking station was staffed by Janelle and a wiry young man with a hoodie pulled low over his face. Kendrick hadn't worked with him yet, but he recognized the kid. Ronnie, 19 at most, quiet, headphones tucked beneath his hoodie, 1 earbud in. Is that allowed? Kendrick asked, not judgmental, just curious. Janelle tilted her head toward Ronnie. He's got sensory issues. The noise overwhelms him. Carla used to let it slide as long as he kept pace. And he did. Ronnie moved with clinical precision. Scan, sort, repeat, his rhythm flawless. But every time the noise spiked, a crate dropping, a forklift beeping, he flinched like a struck match. Then Peter strolled by again. He stopped cold. Hey, he snapped, take that out, company policy. No earbuds. Ronnie froze mid-scan. He's not listening to music, Janelle interjected calmly. He has auditory sensitivity. It's documented. Peter scoffed. Don't care if he's listening to whale songs. Take it out or go home. Ronnie pulled the earbud out slowly, fingers trembling. He shoved it into his pocket, his jaw clenched so tight Kendrick could hear his teeth grind. His hands moved slower now, hesitant, disrupted. Kendrick had seen enough. He stepped away from the station and marched straight to the office. Vince's door locked. Carla's desk empty. He spotted Sherry, one of the assistant supervisors, near the break room. Do you have access to HR files? He asked, sharp. She blinked. Why? Because I'm Kendrick Boone, he said, voice low and unshakable. And someone in your building just humiliated a neurodivergent employee with a previously documented accommodation. That's not just disrespect. That's a lawsuit. Jerry went pale. I'll get the file. Good. Bring it to the office. And find Peter Nallen. Tell him to meet me there in 10. Inside Vince's office, Kendrick opened the laptop, logged in with executive credentials, and began flagging every incident report from the last 6 months. 5 minutes later, Peter arrived, confused but still smug. What's going on? He asked. Kendrick didn't look up. You don't work here anymore. Peter laughed, uncertain. Excuse me? You just violated ADA compliance. You dismissed a documented, legally protected accommodation. That's not just bad judgment. It's a federal offense. Peter's face reddened. You can't fire me. I'm not just firing you. I'm the CEO. Effective immediately, you're done. Security will escort you out. Jerry entered with the folder. Kendrick took it without a word. Peter still stood there, sputtering. He was wearing headphones, and he was outperforming half the floor, Kendrick said sharply. You didn't ask. You didn't listen. You just barked. Now get out. Peter turned and left without another word. Kendrick turned to Sherry. Your interim floor lead, effective now. I expect you to review every past accommodation and make sure they're enforced. She nodded, eyes wide with the weight of responsibility. Later that afternoon, Ronnie was back at his station. His posture was smaller now, shoulders curled inward, but his hands still moved with effort. Kendrick walked up and handed him a small plastic case, industrial earplugs designed for warehouse environments. Isabel filled her high-pitched machine noise without blocking speech. He said, "Try them, they're yours." Ronnie took the case slowly. His fingers brushed Kendrick's for a moment. Then he looked up, really looked at him, for the first time. "Thanks," he whispered. And for the first time that week, Kendrick smiled. Ronnie nodded once, took the earplugs, and quietly returned to his task. No fuss, no thanks, just a young man finally given the dignity of working in peace. The rest of the day unfolded with the rough rhythm of an old engine, still clunky, still imperfect, but trying. The air compressor line jammed twice. A hand truck wheel locked mid-shift. Yet, something was undeniably different. People started to talk, not just about problems, but about fixing them. Jail suggested color-coding bin labels for faster picking. Drew floated the idea of a rotating break schedule to reduce bottlenecks. Pilar volunteered to train new hires in proper lifting techniques. Once her ankle healed, there was no cheering, no banners hanging from rafters, just the quiet, gritty start of people reclaiming their voice. At day's end, Kendrick gathered them all near the break room. He didn't stand on a platform. He didn't speak into a mic. He just stood among them, eye level. "I want to be clear," he began, voice steady. "This place. It's not what it should be, but starting now, it will be." No applause, just rows of tired eyes, but they were watching, and they were listening. "I'm bringing in a support team from headquarters next week, not to take over, but to back you up. And every single one of you will have a say in what gets fixed. Not just machines, culture, training, safety, all of it." He paused, letting the weight of it settle. "I can't undo what's already been done, but I can start making it right." A hand rose. "Drew, you staying in town?" Kendrick nodded. "Every day, until we build a structure that respects the people keeping this place alive." Jella crossed her arms. Her voice was skeptical but not dismissive. "We've heard that before. People promise change. They leave. It stays the same." Kendrick didn't flinch. "You'll know it's real when the people who've been ignored start getting promoted. When broken equipment gets replaced without months of silence. When no one has to choose between safety and their paycheck." Jell stared at him, long and hard. Then, finally, she nodded once. As the others filtered out, Kendrick stayed behind. The warehouse wasn't silent, but the noise had changed. No longer the groan of discontent. Now it was the hum of work in motion, with something else layered in. Belief. He walked to the old cart bay, picked up a pair of cracked safety goggles left on a dusty shelf. He stared at them, symbols of everything that had failed these people, and dropped them into the bin marked damaged. Tomorrow those goggles would be replaced, just like everything else that had let these workers down. By Monday morning, the warehouse felt different. Not perfect, not even fully safe, but alive. News had spread. The CO had been here, had worked the floor, had listened. Kendrick entered through the side door in clean boots and a dark pressed button down. His badge no longer said Kyle, it said exactly who he was. He was no longer hiding, and everyone noticed. Drew greeted him at the west side sorting line, already logged in and scanning product into newly organized bins, using one of 20 updated scanners that had arrived over the weekend. "Morning," Hemered Kendrick said, setting a box down beside him. Drew glanced over. "Didn't think you'd be back so fast. Said I'd stay until we got this right." "You did." Drew held up the scanner. "This one works. It didn't freeze once yesterday." Keep a list of who's still using broken gear. We'll have them replaced by Friday." Drew nodded, then turned back to work. He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. Edric didn't need it either. In the break room, Sherry was reviewing the new shift chart. She looked up as Kendrick entered. "Got 5 new hires at 9 o'clock, she said. 6 more tomorrow, pulled from the waiting list like you asked." "Good," Kendrick said. "Train them differently. No skipping videos, no sink or swim. Pair them with your best team members. Rotate them every 2 days across departments." Jerry raised an eyebrow. "You want them to understand the whole system?" "I want them to understand the people behind it, and I want our floor leads to see who shows initiative without being told." She flipped a page. 2 standouts from your first week. Pilar and Gel. Consistent. Always covering gaps. Never late. "Move them up," Kendrick said. "Offer to let them lead new hire training. If they accept, bump their pay. $2 an hour. Retroactive to last week." Jerry hesitated. Jerry's going to push back. "I'll handle HR." Out on the floor, Kendrick approached Pilar, who was reviewing inventory tags with a new hire. "You're good at that," he said. She turned, surprised. "Explaining, teaching, being patient. You want to lead onboarding?" Her brow creased. "That a promotion?" "If you want it, comes with better pay, better hours." She looked at the young woman beside her, then back at Kendrick. "Yeah, I think I could do that." "Good, start tomorrow." At the South Dock, the long-broken hydraulic lift was finally humming. Gel was guiding a bin onto it with ease. Kendrick waited for her to step back. "You were right," he said. "It wasn't something to work around. Still shouldn't have taken 6 weeks. It won't again." She studied him. "You're not just showing up because the cameras are off, are you?" "There were never any cameras." She gave a short nod. "Then let's make it count." Go across the floor, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Don't touch that pallet unless you know how to wrap it." Carla. She'd been reassigned to a temporary support role. Kendrick had been watching her, measuring not just output, but growth. But now she stood over a young trainee, voice hard, arms crossed. "He told you to wait for help," Carla said. Kendrick stepped in. "Carla, step into the office." She obeyed without resistance. Inside, he closed the door. "I've watched you for 3 days. You're sharp, efficient, on time. But I just saw you speak to a trainee like she was a problem, before she even had a chance. She could have damaged the load. Then you teach her. You don't make her feel small." She wasn't listening. "Then you find a way to make her listen without making her afraid to try again." Silence. "You're capable," Kendrick continued. "But you haven't unlearned the culture you were part of. That has to change." "Today?" "And if it doesn't," she asked, "then your contract ends this week." Still silence. He opened the door. "You've got 1 shot to rebuild how you lead. Use it." That afternoon, the final shipment of PPE arrived. 90 sets, gloves, goggles, vests, back supports. Kendrick helped unload them himself, stacking boxes in the break room. Ronnie entered, watched quietly. Kendrick handed him another set of ear filters. "These are for anyone who needs them," he said. "You're the reason we're stocking them." Ronnie blinked, then gave a tiny nod and walked back out, head a little higher. Later that night, Kendrick held a final meeting, on the floor, not in an office. "Starting next week," he said, "this site will have its own safety officer, not someone from corporate, one of you." Brows raised, murmurs followed. "You nominate, you vote, they'll get paid extra. They walk the floor, take notes, report directly to me. No filter. No delay." Pilar crossed her arms. "And if someone higher up doesn't like what they report, they won't have the power to stop it." There was no applause, just silence and focus. This place doesn't run because of policies, it runs because you show up. Tired, hurt, ignored. That ends now. He looked down at the pallid jack at his feet, the same one he'd used on his first day. I didn't come here to fix a warehouse. I came to fix what I let break. He turned to leave. Someone called out, "What if it slips again?" Kendrick paused. "Then I'll be here," he said, "not watching, working, just like you." He walked out without ceremony. Outside, the sun was setting. The lot nearly empty, shadows stretched long across the pavement. Inside, the new hires were clocking out with fresh gear in hand. Ronnie was showing one how to use the scanner. Jel was guiding someone through the lift. Pilar reviewed a safety checklist. Drew explained how to balance a cart. The people who'd been overlooked were now shaping the future. And Kendrick Boone knew fully, finally, that real leadership wasn't about building from the top. It was about lifting from the bottom and staying there until everyone rose,